So we made it through the stair hurdle.
We did.
Deborah. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. We are here to talk about how to make money off the seas and in a sustainable way to ensure the survival of the biodiversity in the sea, as well as the people and the planet. So you got that right. How to make money off the sea in a sustainable way. Dr. Brosnan, I'm so happy to be here speaking to you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm delighted to be here with you and delighted to be at Collision. What an inspiring conference. Oh, wow.
So, as we heard from our presenter, there's a lot of money being directed already to marine projects, commercial marine projects, trillions of dollars. But not a lot of this is going into sustainable projects. And so we're going to discuss that. But first, I want to know about you, Dr. Brosnan. Who are you? What led you to becoming a marine scientist?
Okay, so I'm an Irish woman. I grew up in the west of Ireland when Ireland was a much smaller community. And I spent all of my time in the tide pools and in the ocean. And I credit with the ocean for saving me from a life of crime, because it kept me so busy and so happy. And what was really interesting about Ireland was that I was working in this Gaelic-speaking community, and everybody there had a relationship with the sea. And there was no difference between conservation, fisheries, finance, community benefits. And there was this just wonderful community spirit that happened. And then I moved to the States to do a PhD and followed a career in academia, which I love because I really love science. I love discovery and exploration. And I was working on oceans and seeing what was happening to the oceans and how degraded they were becoming. And then doing a lot of work in conservation and talking to my colleagues about what we needed to do. And I was did a sabbatical in the Smithsonian Institution in DC. And it dawned on me that I was spending my life effectively talking to myself, talking to people who felt like me. And the more we talked, the less was happening.
So speaking to the choir, and you need to be speaking to the public.
Yes, and that not literally to myself, though sometimes literally to myself.
As long as you don't answer.
But that, here we are 10, 15, 20 years on, and the oceans, we're still telling the same story, only the situation is worse. And that led me to step out of academia and to start to work with people in finance, people in industry, people in governments, who see the world differently to me, but have the power and ability to transform our oceans. So that was my, my journey, the scenic route.
I find what you do very interesting. So can you give us a sense? I know most of us sometimes just take things for granted. The air is here, trees are here, nature is here, and we may not really think about how dependent we are on our environment. So can you give us a sense of how important the sea is to the planet, to humans, and to the climate, and what are the threats?
Yeah, the sea, without our oceans, there's no us. Let me ask people in the audience first, before I get into the data. How many people just love to go to the ocean? And how important are the seas to us? I think you just found the answer. It is we come from the sea, it's the most extraordinary place we can go. And data-wise, 70% of our planet is made up of oceans.
So 70%, more than half of our planet is all oceans.
Yeah, over 2/3. The oceans contribute 50% of oxygen. They absorb 25% of carbon dioxide. They are regulators of climate change. They're regulators of our climate. On top of that, if the oceans were a country, they would rank 7th in the world in terms of gross marine product. So they are a major nation. They protect us from storms. They protect us from pollution. They provide food for 1 billion people every day. 260 million people around the world work in marine-related jobs. So in essence, they are the most life-sustaining system on the planet, and they're also one of the major economic drivers on the planet. I don't know of any other system that does that, does both of these.
We were speaking earlier, I learned early on that, say, the rainforest is the lungs of the earth, and they absorb CO2. But when you're talking here, you're letting us know actually that the seas are equally, if not more important.
Yes, yes. As
for
a
the
whole,
absorbed.
yeah.
Yeah, when CO2, as we know, is the primary driver behind the greenhouse gas effect, and also the warming of the planet. So let's get to the money issue. As of December last year, assets under management at global exchange traded funds that are geared towards environmental, social, and governance objectives amounted to $2.7 trillion. Okay, it's a lot of money. So, and this is from an article in the Harvard Business Review. So, lots of people are interested in investing in sustainability issues, and yet sustainable projects in the sea are not getting the capital they need. What's happening?
No, you're right. It's extraordinary. Like SDG, Sustainable Development Goal number 14, which is basically life beneath the sea, receives the least amount of funding of any of the Sustainable Development Goals. Philanthropic funding to the ocean is less than, over 10 years, it's been less than 0.05% of funding into the oceans. So what we're seeing is that even while there's great interest in ESG, a lot of that money is not going into sustainability. A lot of the projects that are being funded or have been funded, which tend to be fisheries, have been into unsustainable practices. So we're really at a tipping point where we need to step back and ask ourselves, what can we do to start putting more funding into the ocean? Where are the opportunities in the ocean? And how do we get people to recognize the risk of not investing in the ocean?
You know, once again, we were talking a little bit about this, and I still don't get it. Like, you know, when we talk about the market and the invisible hand, laissez-faire, it's about the market, its superior ability to allocate resources. This sounds like a business opportunity. So
Yes.
what's happening? Where's the financial response? Do people who structure financial products not know about this opportunity, or they find it too risky, or what's happening from your point
I
of view?
think it comes from several places. One is there's not great awareness in the investing in the finance community about investing in the oceans. The other is the concept of risk. People feel there's a lot of externalities in investing in the sea, whether it's in nature-based solutions, whether it's in some of the aquaculture products. So we're seeing a lot of companies shy away, and that acts as a deterrent. Investors also think, well, does this sound like conservation rather than investment? But at the same time as this is happening, we're seeing gradually a complete shift in interest in investing in the sea. And I want to give you some examples, because it's not a monolithic. I mean, the sea is huge and different ways of doing it. So has anybody made money? I guess that's the first question. And where we're seeing probably most of the investment and the money being made is in really these more traditional tech advances and to do with climate. So there is a company called Pure Watercraft, started in 2011, and they make electric outboard engines.
Electrical?
Outboard engines.
Uh-huh.
So no carbon output, and that's how they market themselves. They got investment from a group called eInvest, partnered with GM. They were worth in 30 million. They're now valued at $600 million. So there's a huge valuation. Second thing that we're seeing in terms of, if you like, making money from the sea, is where you have multiple purposes. So there is a company called Unseen Labs. And what they do is they launch satellites that can detect the electromagnetic signal of boats and ships, dark ships that have turned off their geolocations. So basically they're trying to hide. They're either running contraband, or they're illegal fishing, or there's some other military role.
Breaking oil embargoes?
Yes. So this company is of value to national security, to oil embargoes, to insurance companies, but they're also able to track illegal fishing, which represents 20% of fisheries. So again, they're attracting a lot of investment. They're a tech company, but they're meeting these multiple goals. The third area that we're seeing a lot of investment in is basically aquaculture and sustainable seafood products like kelp. Blue economy is now coming up to get more investment. Finless food, which is non-seafood food, made from kelp. Where we're not seeing it, which to me concerns a little bit, is in supporting the ecosystems that actually are the foundation of biodiversity. The ecosystems that if we lose them, we will lose all the fisheries. If we lose them, we will lose the protection against storm surge and sea level rise. This seems to be the last area where we're seeing people want to invest. And I think it is a fear of risk, lack of good policies to support it, and just it's a completely new area. The size of the deals tend to be smaller, so many factors.
If the size of the deals are smaller, it seems to me that would be perhaps great for smaller retail investors.
Yes, yeah, and that's where, from the private sector, that's where a lot of the funds are coming from. So often these smaller companies are raising 2 to 5 million, which is great right now compared to where we were 5 years ago, but it is nothing compared to the scale of the issue or compared to the amount of finance that's needed. The financing gap is in the trillions for ocean sustainability and conservation.
Okay, so thank you for giving us some clear examples of companies in this marine sustainability field. You can see companies that have raised money, they're operating, there's some sort of business case there, and then you talked about the risk, which I found interesting. You know what I mean? We saw plenty of investors invested in certain countries, like Russia, and there was an inherent risk there. So I'm sure that there's a way for the business models to figure out, how to de-risk some of these projects as well.
Yes, I think that's where we do need to put our attention for several reasons. One, doing nothing is not the same as nothing happens. So there is a risk of continued degradation that can then affect businesses, whether it's fishing, whether it's transport, whether it's coastal development. The other is policies. Getting good government policies, even with the UN, is now doing concessionary funding to marine projects that can de-risk it for the more standard investor. So these are beginning to happen, but again, we need to accelerate the pace of them.
So people in finance, people in policy need de-risking, need marine bonds and everything else. Okay. Can you tell us about the Ocean Shot project and its objectives?
Yeah, this was a project that I started with a man called Jean-Paul DeJoria, who is a businessman, also a philanthropist, environmentalist. And he and I were working together on several projects, and we came to it from two different perspectives. One, I work on coral reefs, and we lose more coral reefs in a day than we can restore in a decade right now. Coral reefs are the lifeblood of tropical countries, small island nations. A healthy reef breaks 90% of a wave action, and that prevents storm surge from running ashore, destroying properties, taking the sand away. They also support 25% of biodiversity, really important for fisheries, vitally important to the tourism industry as well for many of these small island nations. But we are losing them at a rapid rate.
Can I interject there, Deborah?
Yes.
Deborah said something before that I thought was very interesting. I don't know, is everyone aware exactly what a coral reef is and why it's important? Raise hands, everyone who understands what it is. Okay. So I didn't think about it this way, but Deborah described these things as ocean infrastructure. So there's very little ocean infrastructure, and coral reefs actually provide an infrastructure so that things can grow on top of them. And that's really what you're talking about here.
Yes, yeah, they are. In essence, it's like being on a reef is like walking down Manhattan. There's all these different styles of buildings, and some species live in the penthouse, some people like the middle, and others live in the basement. They're an entire infrastructure that provides all of these services. And we're losing them. I think it's very difficult unless you've been under the sea to realize how quickly you can lose a reef. In a month, a reef can literally be gone because we've seen it happen. So John Paul is also somebody who has homes on the beach. And we were talking, and I said, John Paul, your home is at risk, so is the whole community. So we got together and said, what do we do? How do we start to respond to this threat? So Ocean Shot really is, the goal is to restore coral reefs to scale. We want to do 1 hectare in 2 years. We are bringing together reef modelers. We've already done that to determine what shape a reef should be, where we should put it, how far offshore to keep sand on the beach. And for all of you here who might be interested in tech, we're working with the government of Antigua and Barbuda, Global Citizen Forum, and PADI. And we have now a platform where we're looking at a living lab to test new technologies. We will be literally deploying reefs that we build, but we're very interested in looking at AI technologies or coral planting technologies. So we have a group from Europe right now who have deployed Nature Counts Foundation. They've deployed cameras, and these cameras are monitoring the reef 24/7. So they can do in a month what it would take somebody like me a year to do, because I have to put down tanks, I have to go down, I have to gather data. These are doing it all the time, and then their AI is doing machine learning. It tells us what is on that reef, what's the health of that reef, and we're using it to define the new structure. So if any of you have a technology, or you know somebody who has an underwater technology, maybe it's a rapid planting technique, maybe it's another way of measuring ocean health, we would love you to come down and test it on our platform. We will bring you down. It's such a need, and it's such a great community that's evolving.
I find it exciting when you're able to marry different fields. You mentioned AI here, you mentioned all these things that can be deployed here. And I just wanted to say also, the threats to coral reefs are coming from pollution as well as the warming of the seas, correct?
Yes, yeah. And that's an interesting issue for us, because we're seeing, like in the Great Barrier Reef and elsewhere, these corals have been dying off due to heating, the water that's been heated. But although we don't have many corals in the area we are, because many of them have died, those that are alive are probably some of the toughest and most resilient corals. They have been through hurricanes, they've been through heat waves, they've been through everything. So they're the most precious corals that we can work with.
Clearly part of the issue with monetizing sustainable projects in the sea is because it falls under what economists call market externalities. A damage to the environment the cost is really dispersed. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a little moment and say I'm an owner of a company and I produce certain widgets. I'm dependent on marine resources, but I think I can make lots of money now just producing what I do. And the damage done to the sea of some of my activities is paid for by someone else. Why should I care?
So let me answer that in two ways. Up until now, I can totally understand it, and your decision from a financial perspective would have been right, because there's always been this assumption that first of all, the sea is too big to fail. That's been the assumption we've all had. The second is that there will always be somebody to take care of the ocean, that the conservation movement will step in, that there will be a restoration, that it will be done as a philanthropic effort. Philanthropy, as I said, 0.01% of philanthropy is going to anything in the ocean. And the other part is that there's not been much interest or policy to make you change your mind. The world is changing, and it's changing rapidly. So now the sea is failing, there's no doubt. It's not too big to fail, we see it happening. There's awareness that things are really not good in the ocean. There are changes in policy, both at an international level, and individual countries are now taking care of their oceans and looking at who is responsible for the damage they're seeing. And then there are shareholder in the court of public opinion. And there are new laws emerging about the rights of ecosystems. So you as the CEO of a company better wake up and see what's happening, and either engage and make different decisions, or have courts and the public make them for you. That's your choice.
Wake up and smell the ocean. Now, I know we're out of time, but I do want to ask one last question. So is ensuring the survival of the biodiversity of the sea a lost cause? Will all the most catastrophic scenarios take place, or can we stop it?
It's not a lost cause. We can stop it. I look at what we did during COVID. Science, community, investment came together, and here we are 2 years on, we're all at this conference. None of us are wearing masks. Through our world coming together, most of us aren't wearing masks, but through the world coming together in order to find a solution that would allow us to continue to enjoy our lives, to interact with people, to go to work, to make money. We can do exactly the same for the oceans. It's not a lost cause. There's so many technologies emerging, and it's early days on some of these technologies and funding, but I get up in the morning because I'm hopeful, and I can see the difference that people are making, and we certainly can.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Brosnan.
Thank you. Thank you all.